The grand hall of the Galactic Council stretched across 3 kilometers of polished crystal floor. 47 species had gathered here today, their representatives standing in carefully arranged tiers. The highest platforms belonged to the most advanced races. The Ithori stood tallest, their crystalline bodies reflecting rainbow light across the chamber. Below them, the Velshara floated in meditation pods, their psychic presence touching every mind in the room. The Catharan occupied the 3rd tier, ancient and proud, their scaled bodies adorned with medals from wars fought before humans had discovered fire. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood on the lowest platform, barely visible from the council floor. Her simple gray uniform looked plain compared to the elaborate displays around her. 20 other species shared this bottom tier, the ones the council called emerging civilizations. Sarah had learned to hate that phrase. It was a polite way of saying primitive. 200 years had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council. 200 years of proving themselves, and they still stood at the bottom. Sarah watched as first speaker Thelkaris, an Ithori whose body pulsed with inner light, called the session to order. His voice resonated through translation devices built into every platform. "We gather today to vote on the Sapient Limitation Act," Thelkaris announced. "This legislation will ensure proper resource distribution across council space and maintain order among developing species." Sarah's jaw tightened. She had read the act carefully. Under its provisions, human colonies would be restricted to 12 systems. No more expansion for the next century. Humanity would pay increased tithes on all resources harvested from their worlds. Most importantly, humans and 15 other species would lose their votes on military and economic matters. They could speak, but not decide. A Velshara named Cormina spoke next, his words forming directly in everyone's minds. "The younger species require guidance. They lack the wisdom to govern themselves in complex matters. This act protects them as much as it protects us." Sarah requested permission to speak. It took several minutes before the council acknowledged her. She had grown used to waiting. "Honored Council," she began, her voice steady despite her anger. "Humanity has contributed significantly to this alliance. Our ships patrol the dangerous sectors where others will not go. Our engineers maintain the atmospheric processors on 14 colony worlds. Our medical teams staff 73% of frontier hospitals. We ask for nothing except fair treatment and the freedom to grow." First speaker. Thelkaris's body flickered with what might have been amusement. "Ambassador Chen, your species' willingness to serve in hazardous roles is noted and appreciated. However, enthusiasm does not equal wisdom. Your people have been spacefaring for merely 400 years. The Ithori have traveled the stars for 40,000. Surely you understand the difference." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the upper tiers. Sarah noticed that several species on her level remained silent. The Auranth, who built beautiful art but had no psychic abilities. The Kryn, whose technology was practical rather than elegant. The Torvas, who preferred direct speech to diplomatic games. They understood what was happening here. "With respect, First Speaker, age does not guarantee wisdom," Sarah said. "The Council has become comfortable. You assign the difficult work to species you consider lesser, then claim we lack sophistication. You measure advancement by your own standards and find everyone else wanting." A Catharan named Velotro spoke up, his voice sharp with irritation. "The ambassador forgets her place. This council maintained peace for 3,000 cycles before humanity emerged from its single planet. We need no lectures from children." The vote came swiftly. 46 species voted in favor of the act. Only humans abstained. Sarah stood silent as the votes were tallied, her face carefully neutral. She had expected this outcome, but the unanimity still stung. After the vote, Sarah requested one final statement. The council granted it, though she could sense their impatience. They wanted to move on to more important matters. "The human delegation acknowledges the council's decision," Sarah said slowly. "We have heard your message clearly. You have shown us where we stand and what you think of our contributions. Humanity will respond accordingly. Thank you for your time." She bowed slightly and stepped back from her podium. Around the chamber, representatives barely paid attention. A few on her tier watched her carefully, sensing something in her tone. The upper tiers had already moved on, discussing trade agreements and territorial disputes. Sarah left the chamber and returned to the human delegation offices. Her staff waited, their faces tight with controlled anger. James Park, her deputy, spoke first. They didn't even pretend to consider our position. No, Sarah agreed. They didn't. What do we do now? Sarah walked to the window overlooking the council station. Thousands of ships filled the space around them, representing every member species. Human vessels were easy to spot. They were smaller, more utilitarian, built for function rather than display. She could see a human rescue ship docking after responding to a mining accident in the Kepler sector. Another human transport carried medical supplies to a plague-stricken colony. Daily work that earned no recognition. We follow protocol, Sarah said. We honor every contract we've signed. We fulfill every obligation we've made, and then we leave. Her staff exchanged glances. Leave? Someone asked. They've made their position clear, Sarah said. They want our labor but not our voice. They want our sacrifice but not our respect. We've spent 200 years proving ourselves and it's never enough. So we stop trying to convince them. We go where we're actually wanted. The council won't just let us walk away, James warned. They can't stop us, Sarah replied. We've broken no laws. We've made no threats. We'll simply exercise our right to relocate our people. The council charter guarantees it. Over the following weeks, Sarah met quietly with ambassadors from other bottom-tier species. Some were interested in humanity's plans. Others were too afraid to act. The Orinth ambassador, a graceful being named Thiralan, summed up the situation. The council will not understand until it's too late. They've forgotten that civilizations built on exploitation always fall. I hope your people find what they're looking for out there. Sarah began sending encrypted messages back to Earth and the human colonies. Start preparations. Survey routes beyond council space. Identify every contract and obligation. Begin planning the largest migration in human history. Do it quietly. Do it carefully. Do it right. The council barely noticed the increased human activity. They were too busy debating which species should control newly discovered resource-rich systems. Too occupied with their own hierarchies and power games. If they saw human ships moving with unusual purpose, they dismissed it as typical human busywork. 3 months after the vote, Sarah submitted humanity's formal withdrawal papers to the council archives. The documents outlined every debt paid, every contract fulfilled, every obligation met. They provided 6 months' notice as required by council law. They even included transfer protocols for handing over critical infrastructure to other species. The council clerk who received the papers barely glanced at them. Withdrawal requests require approval from the High Assembly, he said dismissively. This is not a request, Sarah corrected. It's a notice. Council Charter, Article 47, Section 3. Any member species may voluntarily depart council space provided all legal obligations are satisfied. Our obligations are satisfied. The clerk's expression changed. I'll need to verify this with my superiors. Of course, Sarah said. You have the documents. Review them at your convenience. Word spread slowly through the council. Most representatives assumed it was a negotiating tactic. Humans making noise to gain leverage. First Speaker Thelkaris himself called Sarah to his office a week later. This withdrawal notice cannot be serious, he said. Where would you go? Council space encompasses all charted regions. We'll chart new regions, Sarah replied. You would abandon the security and prosperity of the council over a single law? Not a single law, Sarah said. A pattern, a system. A fundamental disrespect that has never changed despite our efforts. Yes, we would abandon that. Thelkaris's crystalline form darkened slightly. You overestimate your importance. The council functioned for millennia without humans. It will continue. I'm sure it will, Sarah agreed. Goodbye, First Speaker. She walked out of his office and never returned. The countdown had begun. Humanity had 6 months to leave, and they would use every day. The first colony ships departed exactly 6 months after Sarah Chen filed the withdrawal notice. The Verdant Hope lifted off from Proxima Station, carrying 15,000 colonists and everything they owned. Within hours, 12 more ships followed. Within days, the exodus had begun in earnest. Commander David Torres watched from the bridge of the military escort ship Resilience as civilian transports gathered at the edge of council space. His job was simple: make sure everyone got out safely. No drama, no incidents, just a clean departure. Report, he said to his tactical officer. 73 civilian ships in formation, 8 escort vessels. All systems green. No council ships approaching. Lieutenant Kamala checked her screen again. Actually, sir, there's almost no traffic out here at all. It's like they're avoiding us. David wasn't surprised. The council still didn't believe humans were actually leaving. First speaker. Thelkaris had sent several messages demanding negotiations. Ambassador Chen had replied to each one with the same response. All contracts fulfilled. All obligations met. Departure proceeding as scheduled. The next wave came from the core human worlds. Earth herself began sending ships. Not everyone wanted to leave humanity's homeworld, but millions chose to follow their fellow humans into the unknown. Mars Station emptied gradually. The Titan colonies packed their equipment. Europa Base dismantled their underwater research facilities and loaded them onto cargo ships. The Velshara were the first to notice something wrong. Their psychic network depended on human technicians to maintain the relay stations in deep space. These stations operated in regions of intense radiation, where Velshara couldn't survive for long. Humans had always volunteered for these dangerous postings because the pay was good and the work was important. Now those relay stations were shutting down as their human crews departed. The Velshara Council sent urgent requests for the humans to stay just a few more months, just until replacements could be trained. Ambassador Chen's reply was polite but firm. Contract expired as scheduled. Equipment left in working order. Training manuals provided. Best wishes. The relay network collapsed within weeks. Velshara colonies suddenly couldn't communicate with their home worlds. Their psychic abilities worked across vast distances, but they needed the technological infrastructure to amplify and direct their thoughts. Without it, they were isolated. The Catharan discovered similar problems with their asteroid mining operations. Humans had operated the extraction equipment in dangerous fields where one miscalculation could destroy an entire facility. The work was tedious and risky. The Catharan had gladly let humans handle it while they focused on more worthy pursuits. When the human mining teams departed, the Catharan tried to replace them with their own people. 3 facilities were destroyed in the first month due to operational errors. 17 Catharan died when a mining ship's navigation system miscalculated. Humans had made this work look easy because they were good at it. The Catharan learned otherwise. Then came the Krell Prime disaster. A deep-core mining operation suffered a catastrophic tunnel collapse. 1,500 miners were trapped 3 kilometers underground with limited oxygen. The emergency distress beacon activated automatically, broadcasting across all frequencies. In the past, human rescue teams would have responded within hours. They specialized in dangerous extractions. They had the equipment, the training, and the willingness to risk their lives for strangers. Humans had rescued thousands of council citizens over the past 2 centuries, asking nothing in return except acknowledgement of their skill. Now, no human ships came. The nearest human vessels were already beyond council space, en route to destinations unknown. The council scrambled to organize a rescue mission, but it took days to assemble the right equipment and find volunteers willing to enter the unstable tunnels. By the time they reached the trapped miners, 72 hours had passed. They recovered 1,247 bodies. 238 miners survived but suffered permanent injuries from oxygen deprivation. The disaster shocked the council. First speaker Thelkaris gave a speech expressing condolences and promising improvements to emergency response systems. He didn't mention that humans had been 90% of those emergency response systems. On her flagship, Ambassador Chen read the reports about Krell Prime. Her deputy James Park found her staring out at the stars, her expression unreadable. 1,200 dead, James said quietly. We could have saved them. Yes, Sarah agreed. If they had treated us as equals instead of servants. If they had paid us fairly instead of exploiting our willingness to help. If they had respected our contributions instead of taking them for granted. We could have saved them. That doesn't make it easier. No, Sarah said. It doesn't. But we can't sacrifice ourselves forever for people who hold us in contempt. Every human who died on a rescue mission, every human who suffered in dangerous jobs, every human who gave their best years to building something better, they deserved respect. The council never gave it, so we leave, and they learn what our contributions were actually worth. The exodus continued. Human agricultural specialists departed the Athori colony worlds, leaving behind detailed records of the terraforming work they'd been doing. The Athori didn't understand most of it. They had approved the projects but never paid attention to the details. Humans had been manually adjusting soil compositions, managing bacterial colonies, and regulating atmospheric moisture across 17 worlds. It was delicate, constant work. Within 3 months, crops began failing. The carefully balanced ecosystem started reverting to unstable states. The authority brought in their own scientists, who looked at the human records and realized the scope of the problem. Every world needed continuous micromanagement. The authority had neither the patience nor the personnel for such tedious work. Medical stations across frontier space shut down as human doctors and nurses departed. Some council species tried to maintain them, but they lacked the human combination of skill and dedication. Humans had staffed the frontier facilities because other species preferred comfortable positions in central worlds. Now frontier colonies lost their medical care entirely. Trade routes became dangerous. Human merchants had established shipping lanes through areas other species considered too risky. They'd built relationships with independent stations and minor powers outside council control. They'd created an informal network that kept goods flowing to remote regions. When the humans left, pirates moved in. Ships from other species refused to travel these routes. Frontier colonies began running short on essential supplies. The council called an emergency session 3 months into the exodus. Various representatives blamed each other for the deteriorating situation. The Velshara accused the Catharan of not preparing replacement workers. The Catharan accused the authority of not understanding the scope of human contributions. The authority accused everyone of overreacting. First speaker. Thelkaris tried to maintain order. We face temporary disruptions during a transition period. We will adapt. We built this civilization before humans arrived, and we will maintain it after their departure. Ambassador Thir Allen of the Orinth, who rarely spoke during council sessions, requested the floor. Her musical voice carried across the chamber. First speaker, with respect, you're wrong. We didn't build this civilization alone. The humans built it with us. We simply took credit while they did the work. Now we're seeing what happens when the foundation leaves and only the decorative facade remains. The council erupted in angry responses. Thiralen's homeworld would face sanctions for such disrespect. Her species would be disciplined. She stood calmly through the threats, her expression serene. The Orinth began departing council space the following week. They weren't as organized as the humans, but they followed the same path. Other bottom-tier species started making inquiries about voluntary departure procedures. The council tried offering concessions to convince humans to return. Better voting rights, reduced tithes, recognition of human contributions. Sarah Chen received each offer and declined politely. Our decision is final. Humanity is moving forward, not back. Where are you going? Thelkaris demanded during one final communication. We've sent scouts in every direction. We can't find you. That's intentional, Sarah replied. We don't want to be found. Not by you, not anymore. Goodbye, first speaker. May you learn wisdom from this experience. The last human ship crossed the council border 6 months after the first. Commander Torres flew the final escort mission, making sure everyone got out safely. As his ship passed the boundary marker, he sent one last transmission back to council space. This is Commander David Torres of the Human Stellar Navy. All human personnel have successfully departed council territory. All facilities transferred to council control. All debts settled. All contracts fulfilled. We leave you in peace. Do not follow us. Do not contact us. You made your choice when you passed the Sapient Limitation Act. We made ours by leaving. Live with the consequences. Torres out. He cut the transmission and ordered his navigation officer to jump to faster-than-light speed. Behind them, council space continued its slow collapse. Ahead, the unknown waited. But humans had always been good at facing the unknown. It was one of the things the council had never understood about. 12 cycles had passed since the last human ship departed council space. First speaker. Thelkaris stood in the observation deck of the council's central station, watching repair crews struggle with the malfunctioning water reclamation system. The third malfunction this month. The crew was Athori, highly educated, thoroughly trained. They'd been working on the problem for 6 days. A human maintenance worker would have fixed it in 3 hours. Thelkaris pushed that thought away. The council couldn't afford to appear weak by admitting they needed humans. They'd adapted. They were adapting. The process was just taking longer than expected. His aide approached with the daily reports. Thelkaris didn't want to read them. He already knew what they'd say. Another trade route abandoned due to pirate activity. Another colony requesting emergency supplies. Another incident report from a failed infrastructure project. The list grew longer every cycle. The Velshara Council has requested financial assistance, his aide said. Their relay network is now only 40% operational. They're struggling to maintain communication with their outer colonies. Denied, Thelkaris said. They have the technology. They need to train their own technicians. They've been trying for 8 cycles. The work requires extended periods in high radiation environments. Their biology isn't suited for it. Thelkaris remembered the human technicians who'd maintained those stations. They'd lived in shielded facilities for months at a time, earning hazard pay that seemed expensive back then. Now the Velshara were offering triple that amount and finding no takers. Turns out most species valued their health over money. Humans had been the exception. The Catharan faced worse problems. Their mining operations had collapsed almost entirely. They'd lost 14 facilities in 18 months. Each disaster killed more workers. Each death made others less willing to volunteer. The Catharan began using automated systems, but the equipment broke down constantly in the harsh environments. Maintenance required skilled technicians, and the Catharan engineers considered such work beneath their dignity. They'd forgotten that humans never considered any honest work beneath them. A human engineer was as likely to repair a toilet as design a spacecraft. They simply did whatever needed doing. The Catharan couldn't understand that attitude, and now they were paying the price. The Athori colony worlds faced catastrophic agricultural failures. The terraforming work humans had done was unraveling. Soil compositions were changing. Beneficial bacteria were dying off. Atmospheric moisture levels were fluctuating wildly. The Athori scientists studied the human records but couldn't implement the solutions. The work required constant attention, daily adjustments, and endless patience. Athori excelled at brilliant breakthroughs, not tedious maintenance. 3 colony worlds were evacuated. 2 more were on the verge of becoming uninhabitable. The Athori Council tried hiring specialists from other species, but no one had the humans' combination of agricultural knowledge, environmental engineering skills, and willingness to live on difficult frontier worlds. The Athori were slowly realizing that humans hadn't just been good at this work, they'd been uniquely suited for it. Medical care in frontier regions had collapsed entirely. The council couldn't staff the facilities. They tried offering huge salaries, but doctors from most species refused to leave the comfortable core worlds. Humans had gone to the frontier not just for money, but because they genuinely wanted to help people who had no other options. That motivation couldn't be bought. Frontier colonies began dying, not from war or disaster, but from simple neglect. A plague would break out and spread unchecked. An accident would claim lives that could have been saved with proper medical care. Supply shortages would lead to malnutrition and disease. The frontier was becoming genuinely dangerous, and people were fleeing toward the core worlds. This created new problems. The core worlds couldn't absorb the refugees. Housing shortages developed. Food supplies strained. Social tensions increased. Species blamed each other for the crisis. Old rivalries resurfaced. The council had maintained peace for 3,000 cycles, but that peace had been easier when everyone had enough. Now they were learning how to govern during scarcity. Trade had become a nightmare. The informal networks humans had maintained were gone. The relationships they'd built with independent stations and minor powers had dissolved. Pirates controlled former human shipping routes, and no one was willing to fight them. Council military forces were designed for peacekeeping, not combat operations in dangerous regions. A small war broke out between the Torvus and the Kryn over resource rights in a disputed system. In the past, human negotiators would have mediated. They'd been good at finding compromises, at understanding different perspectives, at crafting deals both sides could accept. The council had considered this skill mundane compared to Velshara psychic diplomacy or Athori strategic analysis. Now the Torvus and Kryn were shooting at each other, and no council diplomat could stop them. The war spread. Other species took sides. The council was fracturing, and no one knew how to repair it. Ambassador Thuralin of the Orinth had departed with her people 18 months ago. Before she left, she'd given one final speech to the council. Thelkaris remembered her words. You believed humans were primitive because they valued work over status. You thought them simple because they helped others without demanding recognition. You considered them weak because they compromised instead of dominating. You were wrong about everything. Humans were the strongest species here because they understood what you'd forgotten. Civilization isn't built by the brilliant few at the top. It's built by the dedicated many who do the work everyone else considers beneath them. You drove them away, and now you're collapsing. The Orinth won't stay to watch. We're leaving too. At the time, Thelkaris had considered her speech melodramatic. Now, standing in a station that was slowly falling apart, he wasn't so sure. The Council's economy entered a recession. The human surplus, a term economists had used for humanity's tendency to give more than they received, had vanished. Trade deficits appeared. Production decreased. Quality standards dropped. Everything cost more and delivered less. The mathematical reality was simple. Humans had subsidized the entire council through their underpaid labor and uncounted sacrifices. Without that subsidy, the numbers didn't work. Some council members began suggesting they force humans to return, send military fleets to find them and compel them to resume their obligations. These suggestions died quickly when others pointed out the obvious. Humans hadn't violated any laws, and starting a war over it would only make things worse. Besides, no one actually knew where the humans had gone. That mystery bothered Thelkaris more than anything. Scouts had searched in every direction. They'd found nothing. A species of 8 billion individuals had vanished into space without leaving a trace. It shouldn't have been possible. Humans didn't have better stealth technology than the Council. They didn't have faster ships. Yet somehow they disappeared completely. 20 cycles after the Exodus, an ancient automated beacon activated in the Perseus arm. The Council's long-range sensors detected it immediately. The signal was clearly artificial, clearly a warning, and clearly very old. Preliminary analysis suggested it was a precursor artifact, technology from a race that had vanished millions of years ago. The Council needed to investigate. Precursor sites sometimes contained valuable technology. More importantly, a warning beacon implied danger, and the Council needed to know what it was warning about. But investigating required a team of specialists, xenoarchaeologists, linguists, engineers, and scouts willing to travel into unknown space. Humans had made up 60% of the Council's xenoarchaeology teams. They found ancient ruins fascinating and were willing to spend years in remote locations, carefully excavating sites. Other species found the work boring and unprofitable. Now the Council discovered they couldn't assemble a proper investigation team. They had the archaeologists, but not the support specialists. They had the linguists, but not the scouts. They had the equipment, but not the people willing to use it in dangerous conditions. First speaker Thelkaris called an emergency session. The council chamber was less crowded than it used to be. 6 species had departed following humanity's example. Others had withdrawn their ambassadors, maintaining only minimal contact with council affairs. The Grand Alliance was fracturing, and Thelkaris could feel it slipping through his fingers. "We face a potential threat," he announced. "An ancient beacon has activated, suggesting danger in the Perseus arm. We must investigate, but we lack the personnel for a proper expedition." "I'm asking for volunteers." Silence filled the chamber. No one wanted to admit they couldn't help. No one wanted to volunteer their people for dangerous work. After several uncomfortable minutes, a younger Velshara named Talmor spoke up. "First speaker, perhaps we should contact the humans. This is exactly the sort of work they excelled at." The suggestion was met with immediate protest. Contact the humans? Admit they needed help? Acknowledge that the council couldn't function without them? Impossible. Unthinkable. The council had too much pride to beg for assistance. But as days passed and no solution emerged, that pride began to feel like a luxury they couldn't afford. The beacon continued transmitting. First speaker. Thelkaris sat in the waiting area of Human Station Terminus for 8 days. The room was clean but basic. No decorations. No comfortable furniture. A simple space designed for function rather than comfort, just like the spaces humans had been given when they joined the council. The irony wasn't lost on him. His delegation occupied 3 small rooms with shared bathroom facilities. They ate standard rations from a dispensary. They had no access to communication systems or station networks. Every request for updates was met with the same response. "Your application is being processed. Please be patient." On the 9th day, a human officer finally came to collect them. She was young, probably no more than 40 years old. She wore a simple military uniform with no decoration except a name tag that read, "Lieutenant Chen." "The station commander will see you now," she said. "Please follow me." She led them through corridors that bustled with activity. Humans moved with purpose, working on equipment, transporting cargo, discussing projects. The station was clearly prosperous and busy. Thelkaris also noticed other species among the humans, including several Orinth. They worked alongside humans as equals, their interactions easy and comfortable. The commander's office was practical, like everything else on the station. Behind the desk sat a weathered human man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He stood and offered his hand in the human gesture of greeting. "I'm Commander William Rhodes. Please sit down." Thelkaris settled onto a chair clearly not designed for his crystalline form. "Thank you for seeing us, Commander. I'm First Speaker Thelkaris of the Galactic Council. We've come to request humanity's assistance with an urgent matter." Rhodes nodded slowly. "I'm aware of who you are, First Speaker. The question is, why should we help you?" "Because lives are at stake," Thelkaris said. "An ancient precursor beacon has activated in the Perseus arm. We believe it's warning of a significant threat. Humans have always excelled at xenoarchaeological investigation. We need your expertise." "Interesting," Rhodes said. "So when you needed someone to maintain your relay stations in deadly radiation zones, humans were suitable. When you needed miners willing to die in collapsing tunnels, humans were suitable. When you needed doctors willing to serve on forgotten frontier worlds, humans were suitable. And now that you need xenoarchaeologists willing to investigate ancient warnings, humans are suitable. Tell me, First Speaker, when were humans suitable for council leadership? When were we suitable for equal treatment?" Thelkaris felt his form dim. "Commander, I understand your bitterness. The council made mistakes in how we treated humanity, but this threat may affect everyone, including humans. Surely you don't want innocent people to die because of past grievances?" Rhodes leaned back in his chair. "You're right that we don't want innocent people to die. That's why we'll investigate this beacon ourselves. We don't need the council's permission or participation. In fact, we'd prefer you stay out of our way. You already know about the beacon?" "We've known for 3 weeks," Rhodes said. "We have ships en route to investigate. Unlike the council, we actually maintain active exploration programs in remote regions. That beacon activated on the edge of human space. We take threats to our territory seriously." Thelkaris processed this information. "Human space? How far have you expanded?" Rhodes smiled slightly. "Far enough. The galaxy is large, First Speaker. The council occupies a comfortable region near the core. We've been exploring the rim and beyond. We've found remarkable things out here, including friends." "Friends?" "The species you rejected or ignored. The ones you considered too primitive, too strange, or too difficult to integrate into your hierarchy. They've been much more accepting of humanity. We've built something new together, something better than what the council offers." Before Thelkaris could respond, an alarm sounded throughout the station. Rhodes's expression changed immediately. He accessed his terminal, reading rapidly. His face went pale. "Lieutenant Chen," he called. His aide appeared instantly. "Initiate Protocol 7. Recall all civilian ships to defended stations. Activate the emergency network. What's happening?" Thelkaris asked. Rhodes turned his terminal screen toward the delegation. It showed a star map with red markers spreading across a region of space. "The Devourers have arrived. That beacon wasn't just warning us, it was calling them. An ancient containment system failed and now they're loose." "The Devourers?" "A hive mind species that consumes entire biospheres," Rhodes explained. "They break down all organic and synthetic matter to fuel their expansion. They were imprisoned by the precursors millions of years ago. The beacon was part of a warning network that activated when the containment failed. We were hoping to get there first and assess the situation. Looks like we're too late." The screen showed simulations based on current data. The Devourers were spreading rapidly, moving toward populated space. Their trajectory would bring them into council territory within months. "How many ships do they have?" Thelkaris asked. "Ships?" Rhodes looked at him. "First Speaker, they don't use ships. They are ships. Or more accurately, they convert consumed matter into more of themselves. Every planet they consume adds to their mass. Every ship they destroy becomes raw material. They're not an army, they're a plague." Thelkaris felt something he'd never experienced before, genuine fear. "The council must be warned. We need to evacuate." "We've already sent warnings," Rhodes interrupted. "We transmitted everything we know to council space 3 days ago, along with detailed threat assessments and defensive recommendations. We haven't received any response. I suspect your leadership is still debating whether to acknowledge our message." That sounded exactly like what the council would do. Accept help from humans? Admit they needed the species they'd rejected? The debate would take weeks while they tried to find alternatives. "How do we fight them?" Thelkaris asked. Rhodes pulled up tactical displays. The precursors managed to contain them using a combination of gravitational weapons and biological agents. We don't have gravitational weapons and we don't know what biological agents they used, so we're working on alternatives. Fortunately, we're not alone in this fight. He showed another star map, this one marked with green indicators. The Orinth brought expertise in biological warfare. The shellac, a species the Council never contacted, have interesting energy weapons. The Mirath, who the Council rejected for being too aggressive, are actually excellent military strategists. The Terran Coalition has been preparing for large-scale threats. We assumed we'd eventually face hostile aliens. We just didn't expect them to be quite this hostile. You formed a coalition? 37 species so far, Rhodes said. All the ones the Council ignored or rejected. All the ones who knew what it felt like to be dismissed by those who considered themselves superior. We built something based on mutual respect rather than hierarchy. And now that alliance is about to be tested, the Council delegation watched as Rhodes coordinated responses. Human efficiency was on full display. Orders were given and followed without debate. Information flowed smoothly. Every person knew their role and executed it perfectly. This was humanity operating at full capacity, without the Council's bureaucracy slowing them down. A communication came in from a human scout ship. Commander Rhodes, we've made contact with the Devourers. Attempted communication failed. They don't negotiate. They just consume. We're falling back to Rally Point Gamma. Acknowledged, Rhodes replied. All ships initiate defensive protocol. Do not engage individually. Wait for fleet formations. He turned back to Thelkaris. First speaker, you need to return to Council space. Tell them everything you've learned. Tell them the Devourers will reach Council territory in approximately 4 months. Tell them they need to evacuate their frontier colonies and concentrate their forces. What about Earth? Thelkaris asked. Is humanity's homeworld safe? Rhodes's expression hardened. Earth is far behind our defensive lines. We learned from the Council's example. Never leave your home undefended while you're out helping others. But millions of Council citizens are in danger right now. That matters more than our past grievances. Thelkaris felt his crystalline form pulse with shame. Even now, after everything, humans were thinking about saving Council lives. Commander, I was wrong. The entire Council was wrong. We saw your willingness to help as weakness. We saw your humility as inferiority. We saw your dedication as mere service. We were fools. Yes, Rhodes agreed simply. You were. But this isn't the time for apologies. It's time for action. Get back to Council space. Convince them to prepare. We'll buy you as much time as we can. The delegation was escorted back to their ship with urgent efficiency. As they departed the station, Thelkaris watched human warships moving into formation. Dozens of vessels well-maintained and ready for combat. The Council had assumed humans were too peaceful for military excellence. Another mistake in a long line of mistakes. The journey back to Council space took 6 days. During that time, Thelkaris reviewed all the data Rhodes had provided. The Devourers were unlike any threat the galaxy had faced in recorded history. They couldn't be negotiated with. They couldn't be intimidated. They could only be fought, and fighting them required the kind of determination humans specialized in. The human fleet arrived in Council space exactly when they said they would. No delays, no excuses. Just professional efficiency. 200 warships jumped in formation, followed by 50 hospital ships, 80 cargo vessels loaded with supplies, and 30 specialized evacuation transports. Commander William Rhodes led the fleet personally. First speaker Thelkaris watched from the Council station as the human ships took up defensive positions. Each vessel moved with practiced precision. Within 3 hours, they'd established a defensive perimeter around the most vulnerable colonies. Within 6 hours, evacuation operations had begun on 7 frontier worlds in the Devourer's path. Rhodes arrived at the Council station 12 hours after the fleet's arrival. He walked into the Council chamber wearing full military dress uniform, flanked by 2 guards. The chamber was packed. Every species wanted to see the humans who'd come to save them. Commander Rhodes, Thelkaris greeted him. Thank you for coming. We've prepared accommodations. We're not here for comfort, Rhodes interrupted. We're here to work. Show me your defense plans. The Council's military advisors presented their strategies. Rhodes listened without expression, occasionally making notes on his tablet. When they finished, he was quiet for a long moment. These plans won't work, he finally said. You're thinking about this like a traditional military engagement. The Devourers don't fight battles. They consume territory. You need to think about containment, not victory. What do you suggest? Thelkaris asked. Rhodes uploaded new tactical displays. We evacuate everything in their direct path. Every colony, every station, every ship. We don't try to hold ground, we can't. Instead, we create kill zones, areas where we can engage them with maximum firepower and minimum collateral damage. We fight a retreating defense, buying time while we search for a permanent solution. A Catharan admiral spoke up. That's a coward's strategy. We should meet them head-on. Rhodes turned to look at him. Admiral, with respect, your species lost 14 mining facilities because you were too proud to admit humans were better at the work. Don't let that same pride kill millions now. This enemy doesn't care about honor or bravery. They care about mass. Every ship you lose fighting them directly becomes part of their forces. We need to be smarter than that. The Admiral looked like he wanted to argue, but Thelkaris spoke first. The Council accepts Commander Rhodes's strategic assessment. We'll follow his recommendations. The evacuation was the largest in galactic history. 37 Council worlds lay in the Devourers' path. Some had populations in the millions. Others were small colonies or research stations. All needed to be emptied within weeks. Human ships moved with incredible efficiency. They didn't just evacuate people. They evacuated infrastructure, power generators, medical equipment, agricultural systems. Everything that could be moved was moved. Everything that couldn't be moved was destroyed to deny resources to the Devourers. The Council species watched in amazement as humans coordinated this massive operation. There was no arguing about who had priority. No fighting over limited transport space. The humans had created simple, fair protocols. Children first, then elderly, then injured, then everyone else. No exceptions. No special privileges for the wealthy or powerful. Ambassador Sarah Chen arrived at the Council station 3 weeks into the evacuation. She was now 78 years old, her hair completely white, but her eyes were still sharp. She requested an audience with the full Council, and it was granted immediately. I'm here to discuss terms for humanity's continued assistance, she announced. We've agreed to help, but we need to establish what comes after. We need to ensure this crisis doesn't end with everything returning to the old ways. What are your requirements? Thelkaris asked. Sarah transmitted a document to every representative. The Galactic Charter revised. Every species gets one vote, regardless of age or technological level. All votes count equally. No more tiers, no more hierarchies, no more exploitation of those you consider primitive. That would fundamentally change the Council, a Velshara representative protested. Yes, Sarah agreed. That's the point. The old Council is dead. It died when you passed the Sapient Limitation Act. When you drove us away and then discovered you couldn't function without us. When you learned that the species you considered lesser were actually holding your civilization together. The old Council is dead and good riddance. The question is whether you'll help us build something better to replace it. The debate lasted 3 days. Some species resisted. The Authority argued that wisdom came with age and advancement. The Catharan insisted that military strength should determine leadership. The Velshara claimed that psychic abilities made them natural arbiters. Sarah listened to every argument and refuted each one calmly. The Authority are ancient, but you couldn't maintain the systems humans built. The Catharan are strong, but you can't operate your own minds safely. The Velshara are psychic, but you can't fix your own relay networks. Age doesn't equal wisdom. Strength doesn't equal competence. Ability doesn't equal worth. Every species has value. Every voice deserves to be heard. That's what we're building. A true alliance, not a hierarchy with a fancy name. In the end, 39 of the remaining 41 Council species voted to accept the new charter. The 2 that refused, a proud crystalline species called the Zenth and an ancient race known as the Kra'ath, withdrew from the Council entirely. They departed peacefully and humanity wished them well. The new alliance would not force anyone to participate. The Devourers reached Council space 4 weeks after the human fleet arrived. The first contact occurred in the Kepler sector, where a Council observation post got too close. The Devourers consumed the station in minutes, converting its mass into more of themselves. Rhodes watched the footage and ran calculations. They're faster than we thought. And they're learning. They adapted to our tactics after the first engagement. This is going to be harder than we expected. The battle for Council space lasted 8 months. Humanity led the military operations, but they didn't fight alone. The Orinth deployed biological weapons that disrupted Devourer cohesion. The Shalak's energy weapons proved effective at range. The Mirath's strategic planning prevented several disastrous encirclements. Even former Council species contributed. The Athori's ships, though fragile, provided excellent sensor coverage. The Velshara's psychic network allowed instant communication across the fleet. The Catharin's determination never wavered, even in desperate situations. It was the kind of cooperation the Council had claimed to represent but never actually achieved. Species worked together not because they were ordered to, but because they chose to, because they understood that survival required unity. Human tactics proved crucial. Rhodes refused to fight battles he couldn't win. When Devourers concentrated their forces, humans retreated. When Devourers spread out, humans attacked isolated groups. It was frustrating, unglamorous warfare. No heroic stands, no glorious victories, just constant pressure, constant harassment, constant attrition. We're not trying to destroy them, Rhodes explained during a strategy session. We can't, they're too adaptable, too numerous. We're buying time while our scientists search for a permanent solution. That solution came from an unexpected source. The Orinth biologists, working with human xenoarchaeologists and Shalak engineers, managed to recreate the precursor containment system. It was a biological agent that prevented Devourer mass from bonding together. It didn't kill them, but it stopped them from growing or spreading. The deployment was risky. It required getting close to the Devourer swarm with ships carrying the agent. A suicide mission. Commander Rhodes volunteered to lead it personally. So did Ambassador Chen, despite being nearly 80 years old. "I'm coming," she told Rhodes when he tried to object. "This is what humans do. We protect those who can't protect themselves. Besides, I'm old. I've lived a good life. If I die stopping this threat, that's a worthy ending." The mission launched with 12 ships. Only 3 came back. Rhodes's ship was one of them. Chen's wasn't. The biological agent deployed successfully. Across the engagement zone, Devourer masses began breaking apart. Without the ability to bond together, they couldn't consume new matter. They couldn't grow. They became manageable. The war wasn't over, but the crisis had passed. Cleanup operations would take years, but the existential threat had been neutralized. The galaxy was safe. At the cost of thousands of lives, including one elderly human ambassador who'd spent her life fighting for equality. 5 months after the final battle, a memorial service was held for all those who died fighting the Devourers. Sarah Chen's name was first on the list of fallen. Thelkaris gave the primary eulogy. "Ambassador Chen taught us many things," he said. "She taught us that true strength lies not in dominating others, but in lifting them up. That wisdom comes not from age, but from humility. That the most important work is often the work no one notices. She taught us these lessons by living them, not by preaching them. And in the end, she died as she lived, protecting others, even those who'd once rejected her." The Reformed Council, now called the Galactic Alliance, met for the first time in a chamber redesigned without tiers. Every species sat at the same level. Every voice carried the same weight.